Are we having fun yet? In this video, we're going to be taking a look at routing and pathing and embroidery design. Now, first part of the video, we showed you how to convert all of this into satin stitches, but now we have to look at the rest of the puzzle, and that is routing and pathing. Now, other software that costs money, one of the things that it does really, really, really well is routing and pathing, right? But those programs cost money, and where this does not cost any money, but does not handle routing and pathing worth of beans. So this is a laborious process, but a necessary one, because if we turn on the frogs, you see all of these jump stitches. There's a billion, 1.5 billion jump stitches. If we click on the info tab, you'll see that there's actually 20 jump stitches. They are positioned in spots where we don't want them to be. Like, there's a whole host of problems here. So let's back up and look at our very first jump stitch situation and see where it's at. So it does these first two elements, and you can see there's a jump from this tip to this tip. And then the next thing is when it finishes this, it goes clear up here, okay? So these are the first three things that we're going to fix. So how are we going to fix that? Well, what I really want is I want this piece to stitch from the right to left, and then I want the jump to be from here to here. And this piece I want to stitch from left to right. So how is this stitching right now? Let's go into params and take a look. I'm using my keyboard shortcut to get into params, but you can see that it's stitching from left to right, so we're going to swap the rails, and now it's stitching in the order that I want it to stitch. So step one is complete. We could choose apply and quit. Now here, so instead of going to InkStitch Extensions, InkStitch params, I'm just using my keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-P, and I want this to go from left to right. Okay, for some reason, it's no longer a satin column, so let's make it a satin column. And yes, now that is in fact going from left to right. So that's good. So now if I were to select these two and go into params, and I turn on my frogs, you're going to see the jump stitch is going from right here to right here. So there's no other embroidery involved, like further on down the line. So it's going to be real easy to snip that little jump stitch there and that little jump stitch there. So far, so good. This is exactly what our expectation was. Now, the next piece to stitch, from that little piece, this is the next piece that's stitching, but it's starting from the right to left. And so we don't want that. We want to go from left to right. So you see, it's stitching from the right-hand side, coming over to the left-hand side. And so, we'll choose apply and quit. We need to swap the rails, so it's stitching in the opposite direction. So now you can see it's stitching from left to right. So far, so good. That part's good. Now, if I go ahead and select these elements and this element and take a look, you will see, if we turn on the frogs, there's a jump from here to here, okay? There's no other embroidery involved, and so that is all going to work out just great. So we'll go ahead and choose apply and quit. Now, here's the part that is ugly, and I mean ugly. This is the part that I really don't like, but it's very necessary. So the next thing that's stitching is it's going from this piece down to this piece, okay? Now, because it's finishing over here on the, this piece is finishing over here on the right-hand side, okay? But you see there's this little space here, and you see this? This is a really big space. So we have two choices. First of all, let's look at this piece in more detail. We want to see where this piece ends. Where does the stitching end? Does it end on the left or does it end on the right? So in this case, you can see it does in fact end on the right. So this is good. This is definitely better than what I expected. So we'll choose apply and quit. Now, here's my philosophy. Okay, it just depends on the end user. But if I were going to jump from this piece to this piece, so let's just say my machine does not have thread trims. So what it's going to do, it's going to do a thread jump. Okay, so it's going to jump from here to here. Well, if it jumps from here to here, that's a big jump, okay, that I definitely will have to trim. But if it jumped from here to here, how big is that? Let's look. How big is that? That's only 2 millimeters, okay? So what that means is that's very small. It might look huge here, but if I measure, let's go ahead and measure this. How big a jump is this? 8 millimeters. Now, 8 millimeters, that's about, what is that? 12 millimeters is a half of an inch. So 8 millimeters is, it's what, 3/16 of an inch? Something like that. You're definitely going to see those stitches. Definitely. This here is like a 1/16 of an inch. Like it's a very, very small distance. So, objectively, we want to try to minimize all of our thread jumps, all of our thread trims. We want to try and minimize as much as possible. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I want to show you how to make it so that the thread jump is right there. Okay, so what we have to do in order to do that is we're going to go ahead and break this apart right there. Okay, so and now what we have to do is we have to actually break apart that path, and then this piece and this piece we have to bring back together, and then this piece and this piece we have to bring back together. Okay, now we do probably now have to, this piece is stitching first, this piece is stitching second, this piece is stitching third, and this piece is stitching fourth. Yes, all that is true. Okay, all that is true. But now what we need to do is when this piece finishes, okay, so this piece is going to stitch. Let's just go into params real quick and look. We will have to set it back to satin because we had broke it all apart again. So this piece is stitching from right to left, so we swap the rails. We needed to stitch the other direction. Okay, so that part is going to work just beautifully. But then this needs to stitch from right to left. Okay, so, and it is stitching from right to left. So that's all good. But now let me show you something. So let's select those first three elements, first four actually, and we'll go into params. And let's turn on our little frogs, and you can see what's going to happen. There's a big giant jump stitch from here all the way over here, and look at that satin stitch is going to cover up that jump stitch 100 times. We can't have that, okay? So how do we fix it? And this is the crazy part of InkStitch that's just going to drive you absolutely batty. Because it takes time. It takes time to do all this. Now, we can do it. It just takes time. And this is what you won't find in other video tutorials. So what do we got to do? Well, we take our first piece and our second piece. Everything is stitching left to right, right to left. That part, everything is right. So now we go into extensions. We choose InkStitch, and we're going to choose the tool stroke here. And it says jump stitch to stroke. So there's some options here. it says do not convert jump stitches that are shorter than 2 millimeters, which I kind of like, and then blah, 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 and we could click apply. Okay. Now, basically what's going to happen here, it's going to create this line. So this jump stitch has now been converted to a running stitch. Okay. And if we select this piece, you'll see path 64, and then you'll see this running stitch is path 21. And let's look at this. Is that really path 21? So first of all, it really is path 64. So where's path 66? Okay, that is the run stitch, and then path 21 is the other piece. I wish this was something other than, the way it shows. But at any rate, so we can take this running stitch, okay, and we just double click on it to add some nodes, and we're going to bury it where our we're going to bury this where our satin stitches are eventually going to be. If we want to look at this in a different mode, sometimes it's helpful to do it this way. So you can see we're just adding some nodes and burying it inside our satin stitch. So what's going to happen here is our machine is not going to slow down to make a jump stitch. It's just going to cruise right along. So when it finishes that first piece, it's going to do a running stitch up to the top, and then it's going to come back, boop, 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 and it's going to end over here. And we need it to end over here because we're going to start the next piece right there. Okay, so now if we go into params and look at this, we need this to stitch from left to right. It's not even a satin, so we're going to convert it to satin. And it's starting from right to left, so we're going to swap those rails. And now you can see it is starting in the area that we need it to. So now if we go back to, so we'll go from 17 to 18 and look at that in params. Let's see what's going to happen here. So I am going to pause it, scrub through here. So we have our first piece, jump to our second piece. Let's go ahead and turn on our frog so we see those jumps. Then it's going to go up to here, which it should not do. And that's really strange that it does that. But in params, it doesn't show us that running stitch. So we will have to go into stitch preview to see that stitch that we created. But that's okay. And then it's going to come and it's going to jump to that piece. Okay. Now there's something else that's, oh my God, you guys might just think I'm absolutely batty here. But there's something else that's happening. Notice that when it finishes the satin, where does it finish that satin? It finishes on top. So when it does do the jump stitch, it jumps right over the satin to our next piece. And we don't want it to jump over the satin. We want this right here to finish on the bottom and jump right there. Not up here, over across the top of the satin, down to here. So how do we fix that? Well, that's all part of being very frustrating for me, because it's so crazy that we have to do this just to get the exact stitch out that we want. So it's starting from left to right, or excuse me, from right to left, which we want, but we need it to end at the bottom, not at the top. So to do that, we're going to choose to swap the rails, and we'll reverse the first rail. And so now it's going to come along and you'll see it does in fact end at the bottom. So when it jumps, it's just going to jump that little bit from boom to boom right there. It's going to jump from boom to boom. It's very tiny, okay? And so when we do this next piece, we kind of need the same, we need to do the exact same thing that we did up here, which is a little crazy. Now there are some tools in InkStitch to do quote unquote auto auto routing of satin stitches, but my experience is it doesn't really give us the results that we want exactly the way we want them, and causes more problems than it's worth. So we want to jump from here to here. You can see it's barely 2 millimeters again. So that's where we want to jump. So how do we do it? How do we do it? Well, we have to kind of do a double whammy here. So we have to break it apart. We have to break it apart some more. Then we have to bring it back together again. Then we bring this back together again. Now all that's back together again. So this is finishing, path 21, and then this is beginning, path 66, yes, 67, very good. And then this piece is path 18. Perfect. Okay, so that is all happening the way we want it to. So let's go ahead and convert this to satin. That's going to be our first thing. So satin column, apply and quit. I actually saw that that was stitching from right to left, which we can't have that. So we do need to swap our rails. So that's taken care of. And then this piece, we want to stitch from right to left. So we convert it to satin, and that is happening the way we want it to, but notice it's ending at the top, so we can't have that. So we do need it to end at the bottom, because that's where it's going to jump to the next object from, at the bottom. Okay, so that's taken care of. And now what we need to do is take these two and choose Extension, InkStitch, Tool Stroke, Jump Stitch to Stroke, and you can see you have a keyboard shortcut to bring us there. Control-Alt-J, hit Apply. It's going to say, do we need a jump stitch between those two? It's going to say, yes, we do. And so it created the jump stitch for us, but now we have to edit its path. So it's under the generated satin. So you can see where it's going to jump, boom to boom. Okay, so then here, we're going to break it right there. We are going to really break it. And then we have this piece on this side and this piece on this side that we're going to combine. And then we have this piece on this side and this piece on this side that we're going to combine. And so this is going to stitch right after past 69. Then we're going to do past 70. And then we're going to do past 16. Where's past 18 here? So path 18, let's see here. So path 69 is going to stitch, and then path 18. Is that right? Yes, that is correct. And then past 70, past 16. Perfect. So it's going to make the jump, and then we are going to stitch from, we need to stitch from left to right. So first of all, we need it to be satin column, but it needs to stitch the other way. Apply and quit. So that is doing what it needs to do, but then this needs to, we need to figure out, so this needs to go ahead and stitch from left to right as well. Definitely there. Custom satin column, swap the rails, and now it's stitching from left to right. But, the jump. Okay, so when this finishes the satin, and it's going to go from path 18 to path 70, we need a jump here. So we need to do Control Alt J and choose Apply, and that's going to create our jump for us. If it determined it needed it, which obviously it did. So now we have to bury it in our satin stitches. And now it has been buried. Okay? So now all we have is that little jump. And then when this finishes and this begins, we have to look at that. Okay? So we need to know exactly what's happening. So let's scrub through. And this first piece is finishing at the top. And our next piece, no, it's finishing at the bottom, but our next piece is starting, I believe it's at the top. And I don't like the way this is. There's something wrong here. So let's look at that in detail. What's happening here? Okay, yep, this is missing a node, that has a node, that has a node. Okay, so now that's taken care of. But let's look at this piece by itself. Where is it ending? Our satin should be fixed, and it is. And it is ending at the bottom. Okay, so then what that means is we need this next piece to begin at the bottom. And it's beginning at the top. So we need to reverse the first rail. No. Reverse the second rail. No. What if we don't reverse anything? What if we reverse both rails? No, that won't work. There we go. So yes, so now it is starting at the bottom and going across the way we need it to. Beautiful. Okay. So up to this point, all of these pieces, let's take a look at all of them now, and let's go into the we're going to go into the simulator. Control Alt S, because when we go into the simulator, it will show us those jump stitches as the running stitch that we asked for. So we scrub back through. So what it's saying is that this is so great, it considered that a trim, right? So it considered that a trim. And, well, no, I guess it does actually show it there. And then we have a big jump stitch there. And then we have a running stitch up to the next piece, come back down. Then we could jump from the bottom of that satin to the next piece. And then it's going to run up and come back down, so it can do that jump. And then it's going to do a running stitch. So that it's just that small little jump there. So you can see that we have eliminated thread trims and thread jumps, at least between this piece, and this piece. And that's ultimately what we are after. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. Okay, so now once it finishes this piece, what does it do next? And that is a question I don't really know. What does it do next? I guess it does that piece next. So it does 24, so this is 16, and then this is 24. See why it's good to name stuff? And then this is 15, 29, and then it's going to come in and do that, and then it's going to do that. Okay. All right. So I can see that working. Okay. So then the next thing is as far as So it's doing this piece first. So it's gonna finish here, and this piece we need it to how do we want to do this? We need it to start from left to right. So step one, left to right. So let's do that. Is it doing left to right? No. So we're going to swap it. Okay. Apply and quit. Excellent. And then, so it's going to finish here, and then it's going to go to this piece. I'm just thinking in my head right now if I really want it to do that, or if I would. How do I want to do that? Yeah, it can do that. It can do that. So let's do this. We need a jump stitch then from this piece here. We need to get over to this piece. So let's go ahead and do that. First of all, how do we want this piece to stitch? I think I want it to stitch from left to right as well. So we'll swap the rails, and it will stitch left to right. So that part's okay. But now I need a jump stitch from here to here. So we'll use our keyboard shortcut. We'll hit apply. And now you can see we have a jump stitch. But I need to adjust my jump stitch. So I'm going to bury it underneath this future satin here. Right there. We'll come into here. This is all going to be covered up with satin. So there we go. Beautiful. Okay, so I think that works out just fine. I think I'm going to just grab my transformation handle here and just kind of, I'll tell you what, let's take that segment and straighten it out, and then let's give it a little bendy bend. I just think that looks a little bit better. Okay. We'll bring this in a little bit too. Get rid of our transformation handles. So yes, so now we're going to finish this up inside, run stitch along there so we have that little gap. So if we want to cut it, we can, but that's, you know, still less than 2 millimeters, so that's okay. That's about the max little jump stitch I want. Anything else I would trim manually, but that works. Come up here, finish down here, and then where does this begin? So this ends, let's see where this ends exactly. Left, right, bottom. So it does end on the bottom, but I am curious where it begins, or where it ends rather. So it ends on the inside. Perfect, that's what I want. So when this one begins, where does it begin? I want it to begin on the left, which it is. So we'll choose apply and quit. That's what we want. So now what we need is we need a jump stitch between these two. So we'll go ahead and add that. And keep in mind, it's ending right here at the bottom. So that is, of course, where the jump stitch begins. So there we go. So it's going to run up to the top here and then come back down here. And then we want this piece to stitch. And how do we want that piece to stitch? I would like it to start from the bottom, which it does. Beautiful. So now what we'll need is a jump stitch from that point to that point. And so we will add that. And bury it. So there's our jump stitch, and we're going to bury it within our satin. And we're just going to go basically right over the top of where that last jump stitch was. You see that? So it'll be like a double jump stitch right there. And it'll come down to this point here so it can start this next piece. And it's going to finish up top. Okay? So then the next piece to stitch is the eye. So I think what I'm going to do though is I'm going to have this extend slightly beyond. And yes, I'm going to have this extend slightly beyond. So that works. So now this piece finishes up top, and then it comes to our eye. So we do need a jump stitch from yin to yang. Okay, so we will of course bury our jump stitch within our stitches, and we want the shortest distance of jump. So we want to do something along those lines, okay? And then that's going to start our next segment there. So that'll work good. Now, what the distance is here, I don't really know. A little over 2 millimeters, excellent. So for me, even though my machine will do thread trims, I much prefer to not do thread trims and have a thread jump, okay? So here we go. Now we can kind of look at this entire fish. It's all been routed exactly the way we want it to. So we go into simulator mode here. And we click on our, so you can see we have a little thread jump here, we have a little thread jump there, we have a thread jump here, and we have a thread jump here. But if I go into my frogs, okay, so now what it's showing is a thread jump from our eye to the beginning of our outline. That's what it's showing there, okay? So, which is fine. I do see a problem right here. See that satin is going to clip that jump stitch just a little bit. So we may want to fix that. So we may want to fix that. So this jump stitch to this, but I don't know. We could probably leave it. It's probably not that big a deal. But I do want to do something different here. So from here to here, let's go ahead and generate a jump stitch instead of a thread trim. So let's go ahead and do that. Because remember, I really try to eliminate all thread trims if humanly possible. So in this case, we already have a thread jump right there. So my thought is we have a thread jump coming into the eye. What's the big deal if we have a thread jump coming out of the eye? It's right on top, right? Same distance. And I would rather not have a thread trim if we can avoid it. Thread trims and thread jumps, the machine has to slow down, do a bunch of stuff, and speed back up again. So if we can avoid it, I prefer to avoid it. And then let's go ahead and let's just generate a thread jump here. So let's go ahead and do that rather than leave it as a thread trim. So, and all I'm going to do is just move this down. Okay. And let's go ahead and generate a thread jump here too. I just feel like that's going to make more sense. Okay, so we have a little thread jump right there. So now let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now we are not going to have any thread trims whatsoever. which is, you know, a good thing. So we'll go back into Simulator, Control-Alt-S. And if we look at our Info tab here, you can see we, in fact, have no thread trims whatsoever, and we have two thread jumps. And the reason, I'm not quite sure, it's not showing us any thread jumps. I'm not quite sure why it shows 2 thread jumps. Maybe the start and end. That's probably what it's considering a thread jump. So there we go. So we have some running stitches there. But what I want to focus on is this right here, this running stitch. I want to look at that in params, and I want to see how many. So this is a running stitch. Stitch length is 2.5 millimeters. I don't think we want it like that. I want to go much bigger, like maybe 7 millimeters. And we don't want to lock it. So we don't want any lock stitches. See that? Because we want to come back and just trim that out. So yes, so we don't want. And if we have big long stitches like that, it's going to be much easier to. What if we did manual? Change that to manual. Yes, I want that stitch to be manual. Yes. This here, I want it to be a manual, because that's long enough. So yeah, so let's do manual. Manual stitches by default do not have lock stitches, so that's good. The rest of this is fine, the way it was. So yes, so I think that'll work out just fine, and be very easy to clip when we need to clip. Okay, so that is that. Okay. And so now what we have to take a look at, so all of our fish parts are there, our fish outline is there, and so now the only thing that's left to route is the lettering. Okay. Now, what's nice here is the lettering is all scripted. So the lettering is all scripted. So once we start, it can just flow. So this first piece here, you see here we have the letter L, and then we have A1 and so on and so forth. So the A pieces will all flow as long as they're starting and stopping where they need to. So I'm not really concerned about that. All we need is to get from L to A. How do we get from L to A? So I'm going to select those first 2 bits. I'm pretty sure L is stitching from top down. So that's step 1. And I'm pretty sure that is correct. Yes, it is. Okay, so that part's good. So all we need to do is we need to get from L to A. So we'll select that, and Control-Alt-J is my keyboard shortcut to apply jump stitch. Beautiful. That jump stitch has been applied, but you see that we have an issue because the jump stitch is jumping to the top. So I really need this A. I either need to start at a different spot or start at the bottom. So let's look at that and see what we could do about that. So let's go ahead and look at that letter A piece. So we have a couple of issues. we need it to start at the bottom, and it's starting at the top. So let's see if we can make it start at the bottom. We'll choose automatic. So it is starting at the bottom. So the first piece of the puzzle is good. So let's go ahead and choose apply and quit. And now we don't need to really change anything, except we can move the jump stitch location to, yeah, there, something like that. So now it's just going to jump from there to there. And that jump stitch, I am going to change to a manual. So by default, it is going to be a running stitch, but I'm going to change it to a manual stitch. So it's just going to go from bing to bing. That's it. That's all it's going to do. Now, this is finishing at the bottom. So the question is, this piece here is going to start at the top. So what I want to know is, if I create a jump stitch there, notice I have this setting. Anything less than 2 millimeters, do not create a jump stitch. So from where this ends and the next one begins, it's less than 2 millimeters, so it didn't create a jump stitch. Excellent. So we don't have to really worry about it. So that's all well and good. So now all we need is from here to this next piece, we are going to have a thread trim. Okay. So if I go to extensions, InkStitch commands, it'll say attach commands to the selected object, and you'll see one of the options is to let's see here, trim thread after sewing this object. There you go. If the machine cannot do a thread trim, then it's just going to do a thread jump. And I think that'll be okay in this particular scenario. So now when this begins, and this one, so when this finishes and this one begins, that's where our concern is. So first of all, how does this stitch? Does it stitch from the top, come around, and through? So yes, that is stitching exactly the way we need it to. But then this one is stitching, should be stitching from the inside and making the loop, which it is. So now, what about the thread jump between here and here? I think it's too small of a space to generate a thread jump. Nope, it was not. So you see, it just created that for us. So that's fine. We'll just leave that like it is. So the next question is the same thing with the next one. So from the E to the L, do we need a thread jump there? We do. So that takes care of that. And now from the L to the E, I'm sure we're going to have a thread jump there as well. So that takes care of that there. And then finally from the E to the A, we are definitely going to have a thread jump there. And we're going to have to tuck it in. We're going to have to tuck it into bed. So easy enough to do. So do a running stitch all the way up here and then begin our A, and so on and so forth. Now when this A finishes, then the next element after this A is P1. So yes, so we are going to add a InkStitch commands, attach commands to the selected layer, and yes, we're going to attach a trim command there. If it's not able to do a thread trim there, then it's going to have a thread jump all the way back over to this piece here. And then this piece here, stitching from top down. We are not, so we're going to swap those rails. And then this piece here, where is this happening? We need it to stitch from right to left. And it's not, so we'll swap the rails. Apply and quit. Beautiful. And then this here to this here, we are going to have to generate a thread jump. So we'll go ahead and do that. And yes, we have to tuck it in to bed. So we will do that real quick. We'll just grab our by default, the stitch length on this is 2.5 millimeters. So it's a fairly short stitch length, but it will fit right like that. So it's going to finish this P, it's going to run up to here and then come all the way down here, and it's going to end right over here. And then from here to here, to get to this piece, we want it to stitch from left to right, and it is not, so we'll swap those rails. And now we'll generate a thread jump between these two, because that distance is greater than 2 millimeters. I say it is, but it is not. Is that true? I don't know why. Oh, my bad. So it created a thread jump. Not sure what's happening there. Let's look at this again. Something strange has happened. So it is coming all the way over here. Yes. Okay, I don't know what happened there. But I need a thread jump from here to here. So it should just create a little boop, a little one. Oh. What's that connecting to? Well, that's really bizarre. What's happening here? So big line. Oh, that's why. These are not in the right order. So now that should work correctly. They weren't in the right stitch order. There we go. Now they're working. So you see there, it finishes up there, but I want this to be a manual stitch, not a running stitch. So we'll switch that over to manual and hit apply and quit. And there we go. Now we have a properly pathed, routed, everything design. That's crazy. So now, if we select everything, and let's go ahead into simulator mode, and we'll take a quick look at how this design, number one, is going to stitch out, like what order. So little elements, big squiggly, little squigglies, all the way around, down and through. Thread jump from there to there. LA, P, E, LA, finish up there, run stitch all the way over and down and around. We'll go to the info palette here. You can see we do have 3 or 5 thread jumps, and we have 2 thread trims. So remember when we started this project, we had 20. So to kind of recap then, if let's say we're doing 100 shirts or 100 aprons, whatever, we would definitely want to trim this. We would definitely want to trim this. This we probably wouldn't bother with. 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 I know it looks very glaring on screen, but in reality, that is a very 2 millimeters is very tiny. And so we likely would not bother trimming those tiny bits. Now this, yes, this would, I'll go back and make sure that's a manual. But then you can see there's no thread trims or jumps that we need to concern ourselves with in this area. And then we have the one other one we would have to trim down here. Okay, now the 2 thread trims are going from the fish to the L, and then also from the A to the top of the P. Those are the two thread trims. Now what we could do, if we wanted to, we could jump from A down here, bury this running stitch, come all the way up here, and not have a thread trim from there to there. Yes, we would have a thread trim that we'd have to manually trim, but we wouldn't have to let the machine trim it. So, you know, it's a bit of a give and take in that situation. Okay, so I'm you know, reasonably happy with this now. If I click on, so you see here, if I do add some frogs here, there is a jump from here to here and here to here. I'm not sure why this one's not showing, probably because of the thread trim. I'm not really sure. I think I want to generate a thread jump. I didn't see that previously, but I think what I want to do is actually generate a thread jump between those, and then we are going to move that to be a manual. So that will be a manual stitch instead of a running stitch. That will be easier to pull out because we definitely will want to trim that one. And then I wanted to make sure that this was a manual stitch as well. And it is. Okay, so that one is a manual stitch. Yes, I am officially happy with this design. So we will file save as, and we'll call this fish logo 01 routed and pathed. And cut. We got her. We got her done. But you can see there's a lot to it. There really was. A lot of know-how is required. And like I said, we still haven't touched on the whole zigzag underlay and things that I probably, and I would add zigzag underlay and about 10% compensation to everything. So if I come in here and I could just select the whole design, the manual stitches and all of that, it doesn't really matter as far as zigzag underlay. Zigzag underlay is only going to affect the satin stitches. So we will go ahead and the manual stitches, it's obviously it's not going to do anything with. So, and then, so I'll just add the default zigzag, and then I would like to add pull compensation of 10% per side, 10 to 15%, I don't know. I'll do 10. And I think 10 is a good amount. Then we could go ahead and stitch it all out. And there you go. So now she truly is routed and pathed. It's done everything that I would do to stitch it out. It's now ready to go. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you learned something. I hope you don't get discouraged, but there's just a lot to it. Thanks for watching.